Hey, it's Highland League Weekly Season 2. We're back. The first Highland League card of the 2022-23 season this weekend then. The game that springs to mind for me straight away, Banks of Dee against Nairn County. Banks of Dee's first game in the Highland League. What else sticks out for you, Callum?
Well, there's plenty that sticks out really. I mean, Fraserburgh obviously will get the flag and raise that at Bellslea before their game against Devon Vale. Buckie start at home to Wick, which right at the end of the season, that clash was quite dramatic at Victoria Park. Breedon against Rothes looks quite tasty as well, I would suggest.
Right, so over this summer, obviously, all the teams in the Highland League have been trying to strengthen, some maybe more successfully than others. To this point, the teams would expect to be near the top. I imagine it's roughly the same teams as were near the top at the end of last season, but are there any sort of changes you foresee with maybe the order, or are there certain teams coming in this season you're thinking, God, they're looking really strong this time around?
In terms of, I mean, the top four for last season, Fraserburgh, Buckie, Breedon and Brora, I think all look very strong again. I mean, Fraserburgh lost a couple of important players. Grant Campbell sadly retiring with injury, and Gary Harris decided it was time for him to stop as well. And they've only managed to, as we sit here, they've only managed to bring in Jordan Guild. But I mean, they've still got the core of a good squad. I think Buckie's recruitment has been very good. I mean, they did lose some important players, Kevin Main being the standout example, as well as a couple others like Craig Cowie, Callum Murray. But they're like players they've brought in terms of adding depth, like Ryan Fife, Cohen Ramsey, Tom McLennan, sort of defence, and in midfield, all give you good options, and Ballant Demas in goal as well. Breedon, I think it's a wee bit kind of unknown really, because they lost quite a few, and they've brought in quite a few, but it's maybe guys who haven't been exposed to the Highland League before, like a couple of guys like Grady McGrath, one out who scored a lot of goals in the sort of juniors in Dundee, but how he gets on at this level, we'll wait and see. Brora, very much just the same again. I think Craig Campbell would be keen to try and get another couple if he could, but it's been difficult. And below that, I think Fairmartin really stand out in terms of the work they've done. Stuart, I mean, it's mainly young players that Stuart Anderson's targeted. There's a sort of younger core there now at Fairmartin, but the likes of Mark Gallagher and Tyler Makita, who've both been at Aberdeen, and Matthew McLean, who was at Clydebank but's now moved up here, and Stuart got word of that and signed him. These sort of signings are quite exciting. Rothes as well, quite eye-catching. I mean, they haven't signed many, but Stephen Mackay sort of maybe took some people by surprise, but I think on his day we all know that he's still capable of scoring goals. Banks of Dee obviously coming in, I think people would expect to be in that mix, and Jamie Watt's very much gone down the line of experience, because they have a number of guys that have never played at this level before, and you see with signing Neil Gold, Paul Lawson, Kyle Willocks, it's all guys who know what the Highland League's about. And I suppose you probably look for locos to be there or thereabouts as well, but again, other than Gary Wood, they maybe haven't been that busy in the transfer market, and when you see like Neil Gold, Neil McLean, Ryan Broadhurst and Kieran Shanks all departing, it's maybe a bit of a season of transition for them.
We also asked the Highland League Weekly community who they fancy to be crowned league champions this season. Naturally, Fraserburgh were put forward, but last term's runners-up Buckie Thistle are also much fancied, as are Brecon City and Brora Rangers. Several responses named promoted side Banks of Dee as contenders for one of the top places. Ryan Munro was one of those, but he also gave us a full rundown of who he thinks will finish where. Meanwhile, other fans are backing sides who'd have varying odds at the bookies, including Rothes, Forres, Huntly and Devon Vale.
The flip side to Banks of Dee coming in, of course, is we'll say goodbye to Fort William. So what impact do you think that's going to have at the bottom half of the table?
Well, I do think it's going to be perhaps a lot tighter than it was last season, because with the greatest respect, I think there was always, especially once we were a few months into the season, there was always a feeling for all the sort of sides in that bottom 4 or 5 that there was a bit of a safety net there in the way that Fort William were struggling. But then this season, I anticipate it being a lot closer. I mean, Turriff were second bottom last season, but with the signings they've made, most notably Aaron Reid, who they had on loan last season for Montrose, and then Liam Strachan coming back for Martin, I do think they'll improve quite a bit and should be clear of that. Strathspey were third bottom last season. They've lost a couple of important players in Andy Skinner and, not our colleague of course, but Andrew Skinner and Robbie Donaldson. Charlie Brown's been busy. He's brought in a couple of guys for the juniors. Ben Cullen for Dufton was one who scored a lot of goals at that level. They'll hope he can do the business, but I think Strathspey will probably expect to be first and foremost in a relegation fight. Devon Vale, I mean, it's very, other than a couple of signings, it's very much kind of going with youth. So, I mean, their under-18 squad obviously won the title last season, but well, no, with youth you get a bit of inconsistency here and there. So I think they, first and foremost, will be looking to stay clear of that. And the other one that I would probably have in the mix is Lossy. Just, again, they're sort of built over a few years, and they've made a couple of striking additions actually this summer, like Adam McLeod on loan for Bucky and Ryan O'Halloran from RAF. Lossy was certainly a big unit. I think for anyone that's seen him, he's no nonsense centre half. But I mean, for these teams, and you'd maybe throw Keith in as well, that their sort of first priority at the start of the season will be to make sure we're not the team that finishes bottom and then try and progress from there.
Right then, what about the third part of the league, the middle section? There's ambitious teams in there. I'm thinking Clacknacuddin, Wick Academy, obviously a slow start last season, struggles with injury. Huntly, they've been a team over the last year or so that really have been making strides. Any of them you think could potentially break in to the top section? Massive for Clack to keep James Anderson over the summer to this point.
I think there's 5 teams, and there would be in no particular order: Nairn, Wick, Huntly, Clach and Forres, where I could all see them doing quite well potentially in spells and taking points off some of the sides we'd expect to be at the top. Who's maybe best placed to force their way into sort of top 7 or 8? At this stage, I would probably be inclined to go with probably Clach or possibly Huntly would be the two. I mean, Clach, it's not just keeping James Anderson, but they've signed Paul Brindle, who, if Paul's able to keep himself fit, there's no doubt at all as to his ability. He's a real handful. And even the likes of Gary Warren, I mean, I know he's maybe nearer the end of his career than the start, shall we say, but with his experience and the levels he's played at, Scottish Cup winner with Caley Thistle, you'd think that's got to be a good signing. And Donald Morrison as well, who's been with Caley Thistle and then latterly Dumbarton, a young player, but again with experience at a good level, you'd think that should help. I mean, Huntly lost Logan Johnson and Fergus Alberts, but then likes Ross Stills come back, who's an important player. James Connolly, who impressed me a lot at Devon Vale first half of last season. These sort of additions, I think, should help Huntly improve, and the likes of even players like Lyle Booth, who was signed last season but we never really saw a great deal of because of injury. They could potentially help them step on. And I mean, the other one to throw into that is Colin Charlesworth. I think it's about 18 months ago he signed for Huntly. Hasn't played a competitive game yet because he was injured when he signed, so he's like a new signing. And Angus Grant should be back before too long as well. So when you look through sort of Alan Hale's squad, I think there's a lot of decent options there. Wick, slightly strange summer for them. Stephen Anderson stepped away, Danny Mackay stepped away, and they were sort of two guys that, if they were available, were guaranteed starters really for Wick. Gary Manson's been busy sort of trying to pull a few guys out of the North Caledonian League, and if they're Right now, as we sit here, some of them haven't signed yet, but if he signs a couple of them who I've heard good things about, I'd expect Wick to be competitive again. Nairn, I mean, another side that on paper look like they have a good squad. I mean, they've lost a couple of decent players, Cohen Ramsey and Tom McLennan to Buckie spring to mind, but any side with Connor Gethin, Scott Davidson, Andrew Gregg, you'd expect to score goals, and if you're scoring a lot of goals, you've always got a chance. And the last one to mention with that, Forest, bit of a rebuild really after kind of last season's revolving door at Mossett Park, but keeping the Fraser twins, massive boost to them, and a couple of the guys they've brought in. I mean, Callum Murray for Buckie, I thought stuck out to me. You know, genuine pace, whether it's in a wide area or a forward area, real on his day, a real tricky player for opposition defenders. And Ben Barron as well, who's a young player, but anybody that's seen Ben for 17 or 18, he's well capable of handling the physicality of the Highland League. So with these sort of players, I would expect Forest to be more like the Forest we've probably become accustomed to over the last decade or so, I would say.
Highland League summer signing bingo from Callum Law there.
Yeah. Do you think you're gonna hold on to it this season, Paul?
Judging it on the squads that are present at the minute, I do think it might be Buckie's season as it stands. But I'll reserve judgment until I see if Fraserburgh can get a couple of replacements in for the two that have retired.
Okay,
Watch this space.
Well, we'll get an inkling this weekend when it all kicks off. Enjoy the games.
Coming up this season on Highland League Weekly, more highlights from games as well as reaction from the teams involved, more analysis from our Press and Journal Sport panel, and more features with the players and club figures who make Breedon Highland League football tick, plus our new quickfire questions segment and the return of the fans panels. Follow at Highland League Weekly, at Highland LW on social media to get involved in the discussion.